Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Judge Larson. Thank you for being here. Judge Robertson and I, and I'm going to have Judge Robertson stand if she would, and our team here is the two judges here in Federal Way. And we care very deeply about what happens to our community and very deeply about how we impact outcomes of cases, because we have opportunities to change lives in the court. And our Chief Prosecutor, Jennifer Castleton, if you'd stand up and say hi. And I'm embarrassing them, but that's intentional. And then Karama Hawkins, one of our public defenders from Hawkins Crawford. We care deeply about helping people, and I don't know how many years ago it's been now, but one of the council members, a couple of the council members asked, why do we have so many people in jail? Why does jail cost us so much? So I looked, and we had about 90 people in jail at the time. And those folks represented 3,600 cases and 2,400 arrest warrants. And since I've been a judge, in March will be 10 years, and I've noticed a demographic shift over time in terms of the type of people we're seeing and the difficulty we have in addressing some of the situations. So Judge Robertson and I have visited other jurisdictions with community courts and studied that, and Judge Robertson met with the attorneys earlier this year to come up with a framework for how we might deal with this. But the whole idea tonight is to try to hopefully get you, with our first panel, the information that you need to understand why this issue doesn't affect just the folks that are mentally ill and addicted. And I say mentally ill, untreated mental illness and addicted. It affects us all. And one of everybody accuses me of being corny, and I don't care, but it's kind of what it is merging compassion and accountability. It's understanding that what we have to do as a community is band together to try to help those that can't help themselves. Sometimes the people that need it the most deserve it the least, but the point is we need to help them have better lives. And that's the goal of tonight with our first panel, again, is to get you that information to get you to understand why we have to work together as a community. The second panel is hopefully we can see the solution and how you might envision how you might be part of that. I'm going to introduce, say thank you to a few folks. Sue White, our court administrator, right here, and Stacy Scarpacci. Where's Stacy? Right here, right next to me. She's the probation supervisor. They've worked really hard to set this up. Also in community development, Jeff Watson, Brian Davis, and Sarah Bridgeford for your help. We had kind of worked together to develop this list that ultimately was resulted in the invitation to you all. And also their assistance as we go forward is very greatly appreciated. And then Mayor Farrell for allowing us to tap into those folks to help us do this. And what I'm going to do now is turn it over to our panel, and we're going to start from left to right. And they each got about 2 to 3 minutes to identify themselves, what their position is, and then kind of give you a summary of what the experiences they have. And the purpose of doing this is kind of see what the experiences are from different sectors. And I can tell you in the process of setting this up, and we're talking to Sue White and Stacy Scarpacci and I were talking, and Stacy, I think it's actually said it the most. We don't, basically in the process of setting up, we don't know what we don't know. The things that are out there that we don't even know exist. So the purpose is tonight is to get us some knowledge about what exactly is going on in the community and then band together. So I'm going to start out with with our first person, and that's Dino Johnson from St. Francis. Dino?
Hi, I'm Dino Johnson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Nursing Officer at St. Francis. And I can tell you that mental health and substance abuse has a tremendous impact on our facility. We are addressing this all day, every day, all the time. So we have, I have some data here to kind of help summarize this in a short time, but we have a certain code that we call when a patient is out of control, escalating, and being violent towards themselves or others that we call Code Gray. Last year we called 723 of these. It resulted in 29 assaults on our staff that resulted in about $35,000 of work comp claims and 186 days of missed work for our staff. Our NICU, which is supports babies that are born in withdrawal, is on pace this year to see about about 400 or so patient days of infants that are born into withdrawal at St. Francis. We had almost 8,000 hours last year of one-to-one time. One-to-one is what we do if someone's deemed a safety to themselves or are a risk to themselves, a risk to others, or gravely disabled. We assign one staff member to watch that person directly and to ensure, try to ensure their safety and the safety of others around them. We had just under 8,000 hours of that last year, and over 1,000 hours of actual restraint time, which is something that we have to do if, despite all efforts, we cannot keep the person safe to themselves or to others. So this is something that really has a tremendous impact to the community, to our staff, to other patients in the hospital. All of the times that the patients that we're serving that have something going on with mental health or substance abuse that create or take a tremendous amount of resources, that is a resource that's not somewhere else as well. So it's really a great impact to our hospital.
Thank you very much. One thing I'm very remiss here. I neglected to introduce our elected officials that are here. So I already introduced Judge Rebecca Robertson, Councilmember Susan Honda, if you could stand, Fire Commissioner John Rickert, Councilmember Mark Kopang, and Councilmember Jeannie Burbidge. Our Deputy Mayor, until the end of the year. Yeah, Deputy Mayor. So, and if I miss anybody. Senator Mark Malosha, they're hiding there. So thank you. Thank you very much for being here. And so I apologize. So, and if we could turn off cell phone devices, that would be great. Judge Robertson, what do we do in court with those? There you go. So our next speaker is Brendan Moran from Home Depot, and also kind of the face of retailers. So Brendan.
Thank you, Judge. My name is Brendan Moran. I am an organized retail crime investigator for the Home Depot based out of Seattle. I'm also on the board of directors for the Northwest Organized Retail Crime Alliance based out of the Seattle area. I've been with the Home Depot for about 13 years. On a daily basis, my job entails interviewing people that have been picked up for shoplifting, talking to them, trying to identify offense for their stolen merchandise. I would say the majority of the people that I talk to are under some kind of a substance abuse or uncharted mental illness, and that have gone into the Home Depot to steal to purvey their addiction, or have been used by another person to go in and steal. So, I work with retail peers in my job. We may have competitors in the industry, but in loss prevention and asset protection, we work together to fight crime. And so a lot of us face the same issues. And shoplifting just isn't what it was back in the day. It used to be kind of a petty crime, not much to it. Now it is violent, it is aggressive. Our associates are in danger when they're making an apprehension. People are desperate out there, and I'm here to tell you today that the face of crime as it goes to shoplifting is completely different, and it puts us as community members in danger just for shopping in the stores where you get somebody who's violent attempting a crime, or a weapon is involved, and the stores like the Home Depot here in Federal Way. I mean, these people are members of your community. It might be your aunt or your uncle that works as a cashier part-time or something like that, but our stores embody our communities, and when we have violent crimes against us that are pervaded by this epidemic, then we're all affected as community members. So, that's what
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Corporal Josh Hagelin of the Federal Way Police Department. Josh?
Corporal Josh Hagelin, Federal Way Police Department. I've been a police officer for about 18 years, currently assigned to our Special Operations Unit. I've worked in that unit for 9 years now, and a majority of our time is spent doing different projects throughout the city. Our main focus right now and over the last few years has been homelessness, and I'm going to share with you things that I've encountered over the last 9 years working with these homeless people and in these camps. It's drug and alcohol abuse going on. Ultimately, that drug and alcohol abuse leads to mental illness. A lot of these people have given up on life, they've given up on themselves, They've given up on their lifestyle. A lot of these camps are very dirty, messy. There's a lot of young homeless people now, and they tend to be the ones addicted to heroin or meth. A lot of the older homeless, they're kind of addicted to alcohol, very little drug addiction, but lots of alcohol addiction with the older homeless that we deal with. I'm really candid with the homeless people that I deal with. They're very open with me. I treat people with respect, and that's how I foster and gain a lot of information from these people. A lot of them started abusing pain pills for work-related injuries, and they can't get the pain pills anymore, so it graduates into heroin, and heroin is readily available on the street. Also, with addressing these encampments, it's very important that we make contact with the encampments because they grow really fast, and they establish a hierarchy. So there's camp bosses, there's camp shot callers in these camps. There's an abundance of criminal activity. You have extortion, theft, prostitution, assaults, and a lot of drug abuse and usage. With these camps, there's safety concerns. You have discarded needles, weapons, waste. And a lot of these camps are in wooded areas which are protected in our city. So there's a lot of wetlands and water sources being damaged as a result of these camps getting really large and not being taken care of. So that's my perspective here in Federal Way of 18 years, 9 years with the Special Operations Unit. Thank you.
Thank you. Commander Stan McCall, is it public that you're retiring? It is now.
My wife certainly knows.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Thank you for having us, Judge Larson and Judge Robertson, for putting this together, and all of our partners, the fire department and the churches and the hospital and the retail staff. We appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about these issues that are heavy on our plate and also certainly concerning to the community. My name is Stan McCall, and I've been a police officer for 37 years, and as the judge indicated, I'm going to pull the plug in March of 2018. This is my fourth police department. I've been with Federal Way for about 21 years. Currently, I'm in the administrative section, which means that I'm not out on the road like Josh. I'm behind a desk most of the time, handling a lot of the administrative functions that occur behind the scenes for the police department. As an example, I manage and monitor the costs associated with the jail that we use to house our misdemeanor population. And at any one time, we typically have between 50 and 75 inmates in custody for various misdemeanor offenses at the SCORE jail facility in Des Moines. We are a part owner in that facility, and since it opened in 2011, we've been paying for our inmates to stay there daily, and I'll give you an idea of what those costs are in just a second. Prior to SCORE opening, we were contracting with several different jails, including a couple of jails east of the mountains. Yakima County Jail and Chelan County Jail housed some of our prisoners in the past. We've always sent our inmates also to the King County Jail here in Seattle. They have a facility in Kent called the RJC, and they also have a downtown jail facility. And we still have a contract with them, and we do still send some inmates there, but the bulk of our prisoners are at SCORE. And in 2011, we were paying about $148,000 a month to house about 60 or so prisoners there every month. And the costs, this is probably more information than you need to know, but the costs are divided amongst the owner cities that participate in this conglomerate ownership of a jail facility, and we are allocated a certain percentage of those costs. And it's based primarily on the average daily population from the prior year. So our costs change each year depending on not only the average daily population of inmates that we house, but also a comparison between what we house and the other 6 owner cities that also have inmates there. So in 2011, it was $148,000 a month. Currently, in 2017, we're paying $460,000 a month for about 65 inmates, just to give you an idea. So that went from about 1.5 million, 1.7 million a year to approximately 5.5 million this year to house those inmates. And a bulk of those inmates are homeless and drug addicts and mentally ill who in one way or another, attract attention to themselves and get themselves arrested because they're committing crimes in the community and affecting all of you or those who live here and visit here. So we catch them. Josh does. He does a great job of rounding up those people who are committing crimes, and I manage and monitor the costs associated with those things. And we've been pretty successful over the years, and the judges have both been very creative at finding ways of getting inmates out of custody and still managing to address the issues that are required to be addressed, as well as their addiction problems and mental health problems as well. So I could go on, but I think my time is up.
Thank you. Next, Jeff Bellinghausen from South King Fire.
Hello, South King Fire provides emergency medical services and fire services for both the city of Des Moines and Federal Way and parts of unincorporated King County. We went on about 20,000 calls, about 20,000 calls on average over the last 3 years. And about 5% of those are for critical ODs and mental illness crises. That number really is misrepresented in that those issues are underlying causes for a much higher percentage of the calls that we go on. People that have problems with falls, assaults, suicides, or just poor health management, that those two issues are usually an underlying cause that really increases our call volume. As a fire department, our job is to be ready for fires and advanced life support, life or death emergencies, and so every time we're out and helping people with these calls that are self-induced and in a minor nature, we're not available for those calls that we're really designed to handle. The monetary costs are really hard to save for the fire department, other than the hidden costs of increased call volumes, and especially from the mental illness side. One of my jobs for the fire department is to oversee our social worker teams. So we actually employ 2 part-time social workers and 2 full-time firefighters that respond to these calls for service that really aren't life or death emergencies, but they're true emergencies for the people that need them, and they are usually have an underlying base of untreated mental illness. Those kinds of calls take a call on equipment and morale, and are the largest portion of the calls that we go on any given day.
Thank you very much. And as you're listening to this, ladies and gentlemen, you're, again, keep in mind that there's no judgments associated with this at this point, and we're not trying to throw blame or anything. The idea is these are just facts, and the idea is there's individuals affected by all this, but the idea is to understand that the community at large is affected too. So nobody's saying there isn't any sympathy or anything else. It has to do with the kind of Sergeant Friday, just the facts, ma'am, at this point. And so the rest of it will hopefully tie together. Now, next person is Tony Morris from New Connections, and if it's okay with you, Tony, what we need to do in advance is give him a round of applause, because Tony is a former a person that formerly was involved in the criminal justice system, and now he's with New Connections, and he's coming to bear his soul tonight, and I very much appreciate that. So, Tony?
Hello, my name is Tony Morris, and I'm the Executive Director of New Connections of South King County. And we are a community-based organization, and we work with ex-offenders and people just in transition in life. Do a lot of interacting with people that just come off the streets and just need somebody to give them some direction, give them some idea of what's out there and available to them. One of the things that is impressed in my own mind is I'm formerly incarcerated, and one of the things that was really interesting to me was to see how many guys I was incarcerated with who were preparing to be released were scared out of their wits because they didn't know where they would go, who they would talk to. They didn't know what to do about their situation. So some guys would sleep 8 hours a day during the day and sleep at night too, because they didn't want to have to think about what do I do next. And so, me personally, I had a very supportive family and supportive community around me, and so I didn't face a lot of that. But a lot of times, what we're dealing with is people going right back to what they know because they don't know what's available to them. They don't know how to access services. Sometimes services are not streamlined, so if it's not lined up A, B, C, D, sometimes people don't have the energy or understanding how to go from step A to step B to step C, and they need some assistance. And so we offer some of that at New Connections. And so I want to say thank you to Judge Larson and Judge Robertson, and to the court staff here for hosting this type of event, because this type of dialogue needs to take place. And I'm excited to see what types of partnerships and efforts that will emerge out of this, because we really do need to come together. There's a lot going on, but we really need to figure out how to come together and streamline our services and make them available to people so that they can take step A and then step B and step C. So thank you for hosting us today, this evening.
Thank you, Tony. And to clarify, Tony isn't a former addict or
No.
untreated mental illness. He actually would screen folks. Why don't you add a little bit more about what you'd encounter as in terms of have you seen any differences over the years in terms of the populations that as this opioid crisis becomes more and more prevalent?
Yes. We're in a crisis state right now. And I'm not saying we haven't had a crisis in the past, but there really is a crisis right now. And in the past, I think somebody mentioned this, sometimes people were much more readily identifiable. They were in certain situations. You could see that they needed your help. Now it's not so much. You got a lot of working homeless people. You got a lot of working homeless families. We've come up on a couple. There was a lady. I'll give an example if I can. Sure. There was a lady who drove by our organization one day. She was on the run from her boyfriend from California. She had 2 or 3 children in the car with her, and she had no gas money, no gas, didn't know what to do. But you could tell she had some kind of substance issue going on there. And so what do you do for a woman who's running from a domestic violence situation, has 3 or 4 children in the car with her, and has a substance abuse issue? And so this crisis, it demands that we have networks and partnerships and collaborations, because there's no one entity that's going to be able to handle everything that's going on. So we need each other.
Corporal Hagan, before the meeting, we were talking about, there was an article in the Mirror about a 10% reduction in crime. Talk about call volumes and what are you experiencing on the street in terms of, is that noticeable, in other words?
Certain crimes have gone down in certain areas of the city, but the call volumes are fluctuate up and down. It depends on the time of the year and what's going on in that certain group of the city. Certain pockets where the drug abuse and the encampments are, thefts are always there, and crime does spike a little bit. But it just depends on the time of the year and things that we're doing to address the problems out there.
Okay. From the hospital standpoint, when we're talking about ancillary illnesses, illnesses that are associated with this, how much of an impact is that on St. Francis? I'm talking hepatitis, those types of things.
Yeah, so really, substance abuse, mental health, and some underlying illness, kind of what Jeff was speaking to, it's all intertwined all the time. So we see a lot of infections, people coming in with, they might have an infection because of needle use, hepatitis, certain heart conditions that develop over time with that. It's all interrelated basically all the time. It's very rarely that you just have substance abuse, just have a mental illness. It comes in a triad.
Okay, and Brandon, I've used the term kind of like we're treating symptoms where we need to treat the disease. In other words, we need to look at the underlying causes, and instead of, how much do you feel like you're in your business that you're chasing after some things that seem unmanageable, or is it manageable?
I mean, the company is really, trying to take strategies to affect the community. You know, I can speak specifically for my company. You know, we're very community based, and we like to give back to our community. And so, being part of the solution is something that we definitely want to be. I mean, you can put 30 loss prevention guys in the store and stop shoplifting all day, but that's not going to stop the problem. It's going to keep coming and coming until we address, you know, more of the root cause of the problem. So, does that answer your question?
Yep. And Jeff, how long has the South King had social workers?
Social work is definitely a new item, and we can't afford them. We have hired them through grants, but when someone calls 911 and it's not specifically a crime, it's our job to solve that problem. And helping people get connected with community services with the state level, the city level, the county level is something that we're called upon to do, and the social workers provide the expertise to do that.
Is there do we have questions? If you have questions, we can pick up the cards.
If there are questions of the first panel here that you've written down, we can pick up your cards and just hold them up in the air, and then we can have them respond to it.
Commander McCall. Oh, by the way, I'm going to share a little trivia. We worked together when we were 19 and didn't even realize it at Wackenhut. So that's so anyway.
Yeah.
So how much of from the top down at the police department, how much of an issue is that? How much of a change have you seen over the last maybe 10 years?
Well, the homeless problem certainly has become an enormous symptom to, I think, lots of different issues that have occurred in the last 10 to 15 years at the state level. The state, I think, pulled back a lot of funding from mental health programs about 10, 15 years ago, and we began to see an influx of mentally ill people in the community more and more. In fact, our invol rate, which is our involuntary commitment rate on patrol on the street, is significantly larger than it ever has been before. We take people into custody against their will and transport them to the hospital, where they're held against their will until they can talk to a mental health professional. We do that at least 2 times a day, every day, and that's just the city of Federal Way. And we didn't have nearly that many mental health involuntary commitment cases 10, 15 years ago. So there has been a significant spike in those kinds of calls and those kinds of issues.
When somebody gets booked into jail, and you may not know legally, but do you have any understanding what happens to their medical coverage?
Oftentimes, some people have insurance. Not everybody does. But I don't know all the details associated with how the jail handles that. I know that there are some programs that are pretty basic,
Right.
but I don't know all the details. So
I believe it gets suspended, but whose responsibility is it to pay legally, to pay for psychotropic medications, medical treatment,
City of
all those
Federal Way.
things?
the city pays.
City-
And we have an account set up to cover some of those costs. So yeah, the taxpayers ultimately foot the bill for that.
Yes. And Tony, you mentioned something about solutions. Okay, what are you, in interacting with folks, how do you sense any frustration by them in terms of their kind of whether or not how organized or disorganized we are when it comes to trying to provide that kind of intentional way of getting them the things they need to get them to have a better life?
Yeah, I think if there's a way to reduce wait times for admission services, then I believe that the negative impacts would lessen. So I think that the idea of a community court and looking at alternative ways of directing people is an excellent idea, particularly for lower level crimes. I think it's a great idea. But I think really if we can find a way to identify the reduction of wait times for services, because if somebody is ready to go in somewhere to get some kind of treatment, they have to wait 2 weeks. that might be 2 weeks too long or too late.
Okay. How does that affect if somebody's motivated to do something? I mean, what's your sense of the frustration, the people that are trying to, like, my job is to separate the can'ts from the won'ts.
Yes.
You know, the ones that won't, well, there's not, you know, the ones that can't, how do we get them to be able to overcome some of these obstacles?
Yeah, it's very discouraging to many of them to be in a position where they feel like they're ready for a change in their lives, but that change is not readily available to them. And so figuring that out, it's an ongoing challenge for us as an organization to help figure that out and identify potential partners that we can work with in those instances. And so just trying to be there and available. One of the things our office manager, Jerry Davis, does very well is she is very engaging. And so if people want to come in and sit down and talk to her, they don't have to come specifically for any services that we provide. They just want to come and sit in the office and have a conversation because we don't want them to get discouraged. We don't want them to get back on the wrong path.
Brendan, if you were in charge for a day, what would you want to see happen to kind of deal with the issues that you face in your job?
You know, ultimately, a lot of the shoplifting that we see are people that are being taken advantage of from larger organizations, organized crime, drug dealers. I would like to see, resources available for these people. I think people on this panel are in the right direction because if there isn't places these people can go to get help, then the problem persists. They're just if you keep arresting people, there's just more that are going to keep coming until ultimately the problem isn't solved. So I guess
That reminds me of something you told me the other day when we were talking about this, the vulnerability of the homeless when it comes to, and I don't know if you can talk about this or not. If you can't, just shut me up. But the idea of the homeless being recruited.
Sure,
for
absolutely.
various
So,
things. Can you talk about that?
I can't talk case specifics, but I have worked cases where somebody who is a larger scale criminal will go to a place where a homeless encampment or a homeless shelter and pick up people to go into retail establishments and commit crimes. So they are kind of out of the loop as a higher up criminal. And these people are desperate and seriously being taken advantage of by criminal organizations.
Okay. We have a first question from the audience, and I'm going to go ahead and answer this real quick. Is giving to the homeless helping or simply enabling? The answer to that, and I hope that you'll see this as the evening progresses, just think of giving somebody a fish or teaching them how to fish. Okay? Sometimes people need a fish. They need to eat. But it's teaching them how to fish that community court's about. So that's I hope the best answer to that question. And then do we need our own detox in the community? Anybody have any opinions about that? Should I save that for the next group? It's places where you can take people to detox. Now, one thing that I've experienced is that when you put people in jail, you deprive them of, say it's heroin, or for that matter, their psychotropic medications. They decompensate and they're worse when they get out. But you end up, if you put them in jail, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're dosing at a certain level when they go in. They don't have any. And think of your favorite food that you're deprived of for 2 or 3 weeks, and then what's the first thing you go do? They go dose at their level that they went in before they went in, and what happens, Jeff?
Well, you have more ODs, that's for certain. But the root of what you're talking about, though, is a lack of alternative treatment options.
Right.
Whether it's a detox center, or whether it's a mental health treatment center, or whether it's a treatment facility for someone that is at that point where they've called the fire department and want help. We oftentimes have nowhere to take them but the ER. We can't even transport someone to a clinic for a minor ailment as opposed to the ER. The ER is where we have to take people, and that puts a huge burden on the emergency department, and that lack of alternatives is really the base of what we struggle with.
Perfect segue to Dino. What impacts, do you guys do detox, or what do you do there? How do you treat that?
So we end up detoxing people just by the nature of there's nowhere else to send them. So we will provide supportive treatment until the person is sober enough to either be discharged, or we do attempt to find some kind of outpatient access for them, which is generally extremely limited, if not, non-existent in many cases. So we do end up doing it, and mostly just out of there's no other option. So it's us.
It's kind of interesting. Maybe not everybody knows that when we find somebody on the street that's so drunk they can't cross the road, they go to the hospital. We take them into protective custody and we take them to St. Francis. It used to be detox a long time ago, but that facility doesn't exist anymore. So your tax dollars are also paying for that. For those people who are so intoxicated that they can't care for themselves, they end up in the hospital. And St. Francis is a really top-notch facility. They do a really good job at dealing with the people that we have to take there. And we're very grateful to have a top-notch hospital in our community.
Tony, when people are released from SCORE, here's a question. When people are released from SCORE, how are they connected with services, and where are they taken? And does that make an assumption that happens? You guys at New Connections do some of it, don't you?
Yeah, our founder, Lana, she is in SCORE every week. Often agencies are there, and often the information is provided. Sometimes it is provided. If they pay attention and they're really aware of that, then maybe they'll look for that when they get out. Others wait until they actually are released before they start that journey to try to find out what services are available to them. So, the unfortunate thing is sometimes in that setting, people who need the help and want the help, they're not the squeaky wheel. And often the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the oil, and so sometimes they kind of go unnoticed or unrecognized, and they don't get the information or the services that they often need in preparation to either be released or after they are released.
What impacts are you seeing if we weren't more intentional about, if we can't be more intentional about that handoff?
Reoffending.
Okay. One of the questions is how have the residents been helped by closing the encampments? Is that closing the encampments? Is that treating symptoms, or is that treating the disease? Anybody want to volunteer? Josh, Corporal Hagman?
I would say a little bit of both. Our goal is not to just go in there, trespass them, and take them to jail. Our goal is to get them in touch with services that can help them. When we plan a encampment enforcement measure, we're getting Catholic Community Services involved, we're getting Fusion involved, we're getting all the resources, because sometimes the camps are really big, and that's overburdened for one organization to go in there and deal with. So we try to get everybody networked and get them the services they need. So it's kind of twofold when it comes to that.
Thank you. There's an excellent question here that you'll notice there's nobody from the schools. We don't do juvenile justice in our court, but basically we end up, as soon as somebody turns 18, we're basically part of the conveyor belt. So are we seeing any increases in any activity with school-age children, high school and younger, with these issues? Yes.
I can speak to this a little bit in the sense that I would say that we are at least coming through the emergency room, and that is an even larger struggle to find resources for the pediatric population and the older population. Are both extremes of the age spectrum make it even more challenging to get resources for them, especially acutely. Basically, we have Seattle Children's to use, and that's about it. And they have a pretty limited ability to accept all the patients. So when a mental health issue comes up with a kid, they are often sitting in the emergency rooms, not just St. Francis, across the state for 7 days, 14 days, 20 days, sitting in an emergency room bed, just waiting for something to open up.
Thank you. Any closing remarks by anybody? Are we good to go? Okay. Now, there's another question here, but we're going to save it for community courts. And keep in mind that our community, I've lived here 50 years. In September, it's been 50 years in Federal Way. And the reason that we'd like to see this is because we're kind of made up of a lot of silos and pods. We don't want to create just another silo in the community court. And we want community court to be something that's part of a bigger picture. We need to start small in our community court. But the whole idea, if we had a network that could deal with these things that grows out of that, wouldn't that be great? This next question really applies to the community court portion of it, so we're going to save that. But I want to thank our panelists, and we're going to take about a 5-minute break while we transition panel 2. And if you, apparently we don't have any refreshments or anything because we're very frugal in the court. We always, this is the first year in 10 years that we haven't turned back money to the city, I believe, for the way we operate our court in terms of our costs. So, so there's no refreshments, and you're going to have to live with it. So anyway, so we're going to transition to our other panel, and I think it'd be about 5 minutes, and we're going to jump right into the other one. Thank you. Thanks. Well, we're ready to go again. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, sometimes I get accused of being corny because I'm the old man. I'll be 60 in May, right? And I'm dealing with a lot of young people in the court. But there's a couple of sayings I have. And one is no repeat customers. That's the motto, right? The other thing is we run a repair shop, not a junkyard. So the whole idea about courts is we're trying to keep society moving. We're trying to keep us moving forward and helping lives change. And that's what community court's about. And before I go any further, I want to introduce and embarrass our newest council member, Jesse Johnson. I want to give a wave. Mr. Johnson, there you go. And then Martin Moore, Councilmember Moore came in, if you want to give a wave. Anybody new that came in? Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, you have this interest inventory, and as you're going through this tonight, you're looking at how can I help? Okay, that's what this is about. So when you're looking at that interest inventory, you're looking at where do I fit in? And if you don't know how you fit in, still submit one because you may figure out how you fit in. Community court, and I've been asked to give a little bit of a talk about community court. Community court is where we're more intentional about the handoff of services. It involves just, instead of having people come to court and say, go figure it out, we actually have care coordinators, caseworkers, those folks at the court with us, dealing with people one-on-one. And in our case, the judge is going to be sitting at the same level as the defendant with no robe on. We're at the table trying to solve problems. That's what we're trying to do. That's what community court's about. Now, anybody here from Valley Cities? Valley Cities. Why don't you stand up? Valley Cities, exactly how it's going to look yet is not, but they've already agreed to sign up to help us. You too can also do it. And then New Connections is going to be helping us too. How it looks is up to all of us in this room, and we get together in our next meeting to figure out what role we can play. I'll give you an example of how you as a citizen that isn't a professional can participate. One of the things they do in some of the community courts, and we're not the first, it's not like we're inventing air here or anything. There's a lot of other community courts out in the state. But one thing they do is the example is sack lunches for people that come to court, hygiene kits for people that come to court, so that they have something, number one, to provide an incentive to be there, and number two, something to take care of them. Okay? It's the fish we're giving them, but we're trying to help them teach how to fish, right? And so that's how, an example of how, even though you're just John Doe citizen or Jane Doe citizen, how you could participate in a community court. Though, if you can think of it as our court belongs to the community already. Judge Robertson and I are stewards. We don't own the court. It's your court, but the idea is to be very intentional about trying to solve some of these issues. So I hope I've done my best to try to give you kind of a vision of what that might look like. It's all about being very intentional and supportive and problem solving for defendants. So what I'm going to do is start with our Chief Prosecutor, Jennifer Castleton. Ms. Castleton.
Thank you. So I'm Jennifer Castleton. I'm the Chief Prosecutor here. I've been with the City of Federal Way for almost 10 years. I started originally as a prosecutor with King County in 1999. I actually remember doing trainings back in 1999 when I was a new prosecutor, and it was about DUI stuff. They would talk about heroin, and all the officers would be like, nobody does heroin. And sadly, that is not the case any longer. In this, municipal court has jurisdiction over misdemeanors committed within the City of Federal Way by adults and some traffic stuff for 16 and higher. So what that means realistically is I file a whole lot of theft cases. We file domestic violence cases, assault cases, and stuff like that, but a lot of trespasses. We see those homeless people, those drug addicted people, those people with untreated mental illnesses coming through here really regularly. And we get, every Monday when I come in, I've got all the people who got booked in over the weekend, and unfortunately, it's very frequent that I'm like, oh, here he is again. I get it. I see a name on a police report, and I know them. Because I see them regularly in custody, be it for repeated trespasses or repeated thefts. Commander McCall spoke about jail costs, and I think one of the things that's frustrating or can become frustrating is that there are certain people who are committing crimes that we do have jurisdiction over that we want to make sure we can really hold accountable and use that jail space for. People who are committing violent crimes, people who are committing DUIs, putting people at risk. But a lot of times what we're ending up with is people who have committed a whole lot of thefts, and there's kind of nothing else to do with them. And as a prosecutor, my role is to seek justice. What I would love to see with so many of those cases is them actually get the help that they need. Because I recognize that they're on this conveyor belt, and they're facing homelessness issues, they're facing those drug addiction issues, and they just can't there are too many barriers between their crime and kind of getting through this. My hope with community court, there are many other therapeutic courts around now, and King County is actually a place where a lot of them have started. We have the ability to refer some cases out to King County. There's a veterans court, and they do drug courts. They've got a mental health court as well. That's a great resource, but there's still stuff that's that's not ending up there. And so I think that this is a really great opportunity to kind of put stuff to look a little more closely at some of the issues that really are ending up with a lot of, the homeless people that you're seeing on the street, or the people who are just in this revolving door of committing thefts and things like that. If what we can do here is figure out a way to actually, hold onto a hand and pull someone out of this, hook them up with those resources, I think that would be an amazing thing, and I think that's what we're all kind of looking to do. I see a few people in here who I think are family members of defendants who I've spoken to. One of the hardest things I do as a prosecutor, actually, honestly, is speak to the families of defendants, because it's heartbreaking, because they have people who have fallen into drug addiction and who are ending up homeless with families that care about them, and they still just can't, there are still just too many barriers. So I see community court as a possibility, as for a reallocation of resources to actually try to address the underlying things in a more effective way, so that frankly I can file less cases, which would be great.
Thank you. Next is Karama Hawkins, one of our public defenders in Federal Way that's probably sees this the closest of any one of us in this room, probably directly in the terms of the justice system, has more knowledge than any one of us. Ms.
Well,
Hawkins?
I
hope.
wouldn't go that far,
There you
but
go.
hi, everybody. My name's Karama Hawkins. I'm the managing partner of Hawkins and Crawford, which is your public defense firm for the city of Federal Way. And I really want to basically echo what Ms. Castleton has just said. And I want to also emphasize this. We heard, I believe it was Mr. Moran, talk about the impact on stores and on the people that work at the stores in terms of, being subject to dangers because of this, pernicious triad of poverty, mental health, and substance abuse that results in criminal charges. There's another cost. And there are, if you think about it this way, it's not just the victims of these crimes. That could be your aunts, your uncles, your mothers, your fathers. I recognize that it is your uncles, your brothers, your sisters, your parents, sometimes your grandparents, your children that are perpetrating these offenses. And as the attorney that represents those individuals, I talk to the families. And what I fear most is getting that call from that mom saying they didn't make it to their bed date. They're gone. That's happened to me 6 times this year. We have got to do something collectively as a community. It impacts not only the members of this community as people who live here who want to be safe. It impacts you as taxpayers because you're paying for the jail costs, the hospital costs. But I see that it impacts the individuals, the mothers, the sisters, the fathers, the children, that lose the ones that they love to this horrible, horrible triad that is destroying lives on a daily basis. It is everybody's problem. Is it enabling or is it helping? What we're doing now isn't working. We have got to try something new. We have got to think outside of the box. I don't want anybody here to be someone that's calling me, giving me the news. I don't want to have another client tell me, I don't know if I can make it to my bed date. I don't want another client calling me in the middle of the night because they're hearing voices and have swallowed all of their prescription medication. This is real, folks, and it does impact you. And we need you in order to be able to deal with it. This is very, very serious, and I see community court as an opportunity to do something really, really real on a fundamental level that we can all participate in, contribute to, and see people rise up from these situations where we stop asking the question, do they deserve it? Because they do. And we can help make that happen. I believe it's an opportunity, and I hope that we all can join in it together.
Thank you. So our next speaker is Stacy Scarpacci, who is the probation supervisor for the court. So, Ms. Scarpacci.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, Stacy Scarpacci. I'm the probation supervisor here in Federal Way. I've been here in Federal Way in one capacity or another for about the last 13 years. Everybody that comes out of court that has some type of court conditions, they come to see me or one of the probation officers. Just to give you a brief rundown, what happens at that point in time, we're going to sit down, we go over their court order with them. We explain to them what they need to do. We're going to give them a list of agencies and resources as to how they can go be compliant with their court-ordered conditions. Somebody that has a substance abuse problem, we're going to give them a list of agencies to go get an assessment at. We're then going to have follow-up meetings with them to see how they're doing, but they're going to be out there making those phone calls themselves. We're going to be relying on these individuals that have mental health issues, addiction issues, to actually make those phone calls. With probation, I envision community court, and the hope is just that extra encouragement. Somebody sitting down with them, helping them make that phone call, maybe following up to make sure that they were there. Having the appointment when they walk out of court already made for an assessment. That is huge. That takes the burden off them of having to make that appointment. Just even a simple phone call sometimes for them it's extremely daunting, and figuring out where they're going to go. They really need somebody to hold their hand through the process. On the other end of that as well, I've had so many clients walk out of court and they're back in compliance, that they've gotten encouragement from these judges right here. That goes a long way for them. So to have somebody to sit down on, instead of coming to see me, they're going to be sitting down with the judges, with these wonderful attorneys, and having that encouragement. That is amazing. And just that respect for some of these clients is going to go a long way. So that's what I see for community courts, just giving them the tools and encouraging them. So.
Thank you. Now, this is another person that deserves a round of applause. The courage he has here to be here tonight is significant. And so Shaitesh Sharma, a former person who's used our system. So
my name is Chitesh Sharma. I have a joke. The only people that ever called me Chitesh Sharma were the legal system and substitute teachers. I actually go by Lalu. So bear with me. It might get a little dark. I'm a recovering heroin addict and alcoholic and repeat offender here at the Federal Way Court Systems. I've been off probation for about 6 months. I'm going to be 31 on Wednesday. And I've been on probation since I turned 18 years old, right? And I've been off probation for about 6 months now. So when I was 6 years old, I was sexually molested. When I was 11 years old, I was raped, right? I've been held hostage at gunpoint. I've been stabbed. I've been shot at, right? And I didn't know that at such a young age, I turned to alcohol and drugs because I didn't know what was going on inside of my head. I never felt like I mattered. I never felt like I was worth anything, right? And I got stuck in the grips of alcoholism and addiction, right? And I turned to prescription painkillers, and like it was mentioned before, heroin is a lot easier and a lot cheaper to get. And I became strung out on heroin. And I was a repeat offender here in the court systems, in and out of jail. And I could never find anything that worked until I started treating my mental health issues along with my substance abuse issues, right? And while I'm out there in active addiction, I have a negative ripple effect with my life, right? Because I've intentionally overdosed multiple times because I just didn't want to live any longer, right? And the firemen came and they saved my life because my brothers were there to make a phone call. And when I was 4 months sober, I got a phone call that one of my friends had overdosed, right? And I'm literally in this man's at St. Francis, and I'm in the hospital room, and the only reason I'm not curled up in the fetal position crying at this man's bedside while he's on a breathing machine simply because they want to give his organs to other human beings is because I'm holding onto this man's leg crying, right? And this negative ripple effect impacts the families much greater than it does the businesses and so on and so forth, but the negative ripple effect extends to the community at large. And if the community court was readily available for me, right, because I would relapse and I would know that I'm going to go see the prosecuting attorney and she's going to want jail time and I'm going to go to jail and I'm going to be in a 4-man cell with 5 people with my bed next to the toilet and everybody's only talking about how they're going to get high the last time they got high, the next time they're going to get high, the last thing they stole or the next thing they're going to steal for umpteen days, right? And that's not going to change my mentality because I'm going to be stuck in there and I'm going to get out and I'm going to repeat the same thing because I never knew anything different was available to me, right? And the life I live today, I'm absolutely grateful for, right? And I still have this voice nagging at me, but it's now a whisper telling me that I don't matter and I'm not enough and I don't deserve to be sitting here at this very moment, right? But it's not as loud as it used to be. And it's not easy to become to turn your life around, right? But that's the goal of this community court, is to make it easier. Because if it was easy, everybody would do it. But the way I see it is this community court could potentially save so many lives, right? Like my friend who, at 4 months sober, I'm sitting there in this hospital room and he's dying, right? And the only reason he's still breathing is because they want to give his organs to somebody else. And if we can save these lives, the positive ripple effect that can bounce through the community will be the same magnitude of the negative ripple effect. It's not going to cost Home Depot as much money. It's not going to cost St. Francis as much money. It's not going to cost taxpayers as much money, and it's going to let these families sleep better at night, right? It affects the community as a whole, so the way I see it is we need to band together as a community as a whole to address the issue and try to put the changes in effect. Am I going to sit here and tell you if community court was available to me the first time I ever went to court, it would have worked right away? And if I were to sit up here and tell you the answer was yes, I'd be lying to you because I don't know. I don't know what would happen. But would it have been easier? Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the goal, is to make this thing easier for the people that don't see a way out, right? And the things that I've disclosed about my past, I haven't told many people, but the only reason I shared it with you here today is because it's much bigger than me. It's much bigger than me. There's so many people out there dying. Chances are pretty high that somebody overdosed since we've been sitting in this room and it breathed their last breath since we've been sitting in this room and having this panel, right? So if we can put this community court together, save lives, save taxpayer dollars, I have one question: what are we waiting for? And how can I help? Thank you.
Next is Lana Matthew from New Connections.
Okay, so I'm Lana Matthew.
Oh, your microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Lana Matthew, and I've been working as a volunteer inside the Regional Justice Center, Kent City Jail, Score Jail for about 20 years now and seen thousands of frequent flyers. Probably I'm the worst one because I've been there 20 years. But anyway, so I'm encouraged by Judge Larson and Judge Robertson and the city here for looking at alternatives for misdemeanor crimes. What can we do to help? So jail was never meant, I don't think, to be the solution for drug addiction and mental illness, which is perpetuated by low-level crimes, partly because the sentences are shorter, and then when people go to jail, there's limited services and programs. So therefore, the investment of incarceration for misdemeanors to change behavioral and mental issues is zero. So I'm happy and very excited to be here tonight and be part of the solution with the community court and together with service providers such as New Connections, drug treatment agency, other social service agencies who are readily available. I'm committing everybody, by the way, here, who are readily available to get on board to walk these clients from A to Z if necessary. We will all see success in greater numbers than what we are currently doing right now. And as a counselor, I understand co-occurring disease of drug addiction and mental illness. And, you know, the legacy really is you go to jail, you go to more jail, and then eventually everything becomes bigger, and then you go to prison. And so if we can start up the community, not if, but when we start up the community court, clients who were not able to access services without committing yet another crime, like driving without a license, it would be a huge, huge thing for everybody that's involved here tonight. I love what I do, and I love this clientele, so I thank you all for being here tonight, sharing our vision, and I look forward to working with you and for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Encouraging.
Next is my benchmate of 8 years. 8 years. So Judge Rebecca Robertson.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Let me explain to you what our vision actually is going to look like in our ideal world. We operate court. Oh, thank you. We all operate Federal Way Municipal Court 5 days a week, morning and afternoon. People come in and out on various days. If we see them in court, sometimes we know they have co-occurring disorders. Sometimes we find that out later. Most of the time we send them to probation. Probation gives them a list of providers to go and contact themselves, and we send them back out on the street. It simply doesn't work because we're talking about people who have such staggering issues that it's very difficult for them to have the wherewithal to do this all themselves. So what our vision is that when we identify the folks who we think could benefit from a community court, a therapeutic court, and more intensive case management, we filter that into one court on one day, and we're envisioning and we're hoping for Thursday morning that we would have one court where they would come in, they would get an assessment called a risk needs assessment to determine what are all the needs that you have. Do you have housing needs? Do you need health insurance? Do you need food? Do you need mental health treatment? Is there a history of mental health that maybe you haven't disclosed, some issues that you're dealing with? Is there a substance abuse problem? Any sort of issue that you may have, there would be an immediate assessment to determine what are this person's needs. At that point, they would probably plead guilty, enter into a disposition with the court, and we would have every single person there that they needed to address their specific needs. We would have Valley Cities there. We would have someone there who could maybe talk to them about their housing options, someone who could help them get health insurance so they could actually get into mental health treatment or into chemical dependency treatment. Everyone would be there for them so they would not have to search far and wide throughout the city that's not particularly walkable and difficult to navigate, so that their hand would be held as they went through this process, and we would assist them in that one morning, in that one day. We would start them off with everything that they needed. We would continue to treat them as more of a patient than the way we currently treat defendants, which is if you do something wrong, you go to jail. We understand that there are going to be failures, that we are going to, not everyone is going to succeed, but we are doing every single thing that we can possibly do to assist them. So what we're looking to have is the providers to come to us instead of having to try and rely on the defendants to go to them, so that we would have everyone in the courthouse on one day who can hook up with these folks who are actually going to be able to help them. The resources are there. We just need to coordinate it.
Now, Judge Robertson, your background was as a prosecutor.
I was a prosecutor for 9 years before becoming a judge, and I can tell you, when you're first a prosecutor, your focus is you're on punishment. You're young. You don't really have the perspective on life that you do when you're older, and what you begin to see as you go through the system is most of these folks are simply just struggling beyond what you can ever imagine having gone through in your life. And we are not doing the best job we can to assist them. We could be doing much better. We could have done much better for Mr. Sharma at the outset if we had had all the resources available to him in one place.
So what I'm hearing from you is this is a tool, not a panacea.
Correct. Not everyone's going to succeed. We're not going to prevent all crime. We're not going to stop all crime, but we can do better, and we will do better. And other jurisdictions have done better, and there's no reason why Federal Way can't as well.
Well, we talked beforehand about, you mentioned it in your comments too, about the likelihood of success if you would have been able to have kind of a handoff, an intentionality to meeting your conditions. And you didn't want to speculate in terms of what success that would have, but what I want you to do is talk about the difficulties you had and the impacts it had trying to line yourself up with services and compliance with the court. In other words, you're at this moment where you're motivated to make a change, and then what happens between that moment and relapse?
So it's kind of like you got to strike while the iron's hot type of deal, right? So if I'm motivated to get clean and I go and I set up an appointment for an assessment, and assessment's not for 2 weeks out, and after the assessment I'm going to have to wait about a month to a month and a half to get into treatment, I'm going to be feeding my addiction this entire time. I probably don't have money, so I'm probably going to be committing crime to feed this addiction. If all of these things are readily available to me at the courthouse when I get to the courthouse, as opposed to coming to court, I get a piece of paper telling me I need to go to this location, but as soon as I walk out that door, Valley Cities is right across the street, right? It's one phone call away. I don't care if the drug dealer is 5 miles down the road, that house looks a lot closer than across the street at Valley Cities, and I promise you that, right? And that's what happened 9 times out of 10, right? Was I didn't make the proper choices, right? Because I was in the court and I was ready to do it, but the second I walked out of that door and I made that phone call to Valley Cities and they told me I had to wait, and it's nothing against the organization, right? This is just the way the things are today. And I made the call to the whatever treatment center, right? And they said I had to wait a week for my appointment. Well, that means that I have to not get sick for a week, because when you take away the drugs, the withdrawal kicks in, and that's the one fear that any heroin addict has, right? They will do any and everything they need to do to avoid going into withdrawal. And so now I have to wait a week for this appointment. After that appointment, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to them. You can ask Becky. I probably called her every day for 2 weeks, leaving her voicemail saying, when am I getting into treatment, right? And I was able to make it. And not everybody's able to make it. And I'm grateful for the family support that I have that not many people do, that are struggling with the things that I struggle with on a daily basis, right? But because of the grace and the mercy of the courts, time and time again, I'm able to go to work today. I'm able to go to the gym today. I'm able to be present in my life and my family's lives today, right? I'm able to go and I speak at treatment centers a few times a month. And these are the things that I do only because I see that this life is available to me too, right?
Now, the person in the audience is going to get their question asked now because it's a perfect transition. Community court can only be effective if treatment is available in the community. How are Federal Way and the court going to push for expanded community treatment equity? Capacity, not equity, capacity. So we got community court. We're not possibly going to be able to have every treatment provider under the sun in court. What do we do about the fact that we want to do the handoff, but when we do the handoff, or we're doing the rally race and we reach back and the baton's not there, right? Because there isn't the resources that I'm sure if we had people from Valley Cities and other groups up on the panel, they'd talk, geez, it'd be great to have more resources. What do we do about that? Can we do anything about that? Anybody? Lana?
Okay, I think we can, and it's free, and it's called mentoring. There are many people who have gone through addiction issues, who have got clean and sober, and I know quite a few myself, who are just waiting and looking for the opportunity to help somebody else. And it's not necessarily AA, but it's actually having a person be right in front of you to say, listen, we can walk this through. I did that a few times for suicidal friends, that all it was just getting them through that moment. And that moment is actually not as long as what we think. It's maybe just half an hour. And if people in our community, and I see a lot of people here, if you would step up to that plate, you may not have, maybe not be a counselor, a drug and alcohol counselor, or anything, but you have the heart and the passion, like Shta's saying, about saving a life. That's what it's about. It's making yourself available, and that is free. And there's a lot of people in Federal Way community.
Judge?
So we're starting out small. We have no funding. We don't have extra money. We're asking for the organizations to volunteer to come in on Thursday morning to help us out. But what we're hoping to do is that when we show that this can be successful, that we can get additional funding to expand. So I see Representative Palaciotti sitting in the back. So once we're successful with this, maybe we can show why it would be of benefit to give more money to the treatment agencies, to expand bed space, to give more so that we spend more up front treating people with their mental illness and their addiction, so that we don't spend more money on the back end on jail, and hospital stays, which is what ends up happening.
Krama, how much of an investment would that be? That's what I want to call it, investment. How much would that investment impact your clients? In other words, if we took, I'm not suggesting, because we're not having a city council meeting where I'm telling to reallocate money, but we're talking about if we devoted resources to treating the disease, how much of the symptoms would we have to worry about anymore?
Well, you're always going to have to worry You're always going to have to worry about them, but I think that, and I'm sure that Mr. Sharma would be able to tell you, I mean, it's a lifelong struggle and battle, and it's a day-by-day thing that individuals have to deal with. However, that upfront investment, I think, is going to save a lot of resources in the long run. If you think about it this way, and he actually has talked about this, really wanting to do well and comply, but that period of time, whether it's 2 weeks or 30 days, seems like an eternity, and you're out there. And depending on your situation, you may be living in a car if you're lucky. You may have untreated or undiagnosed mental health issues. So, maybe, in certain situations, it might be to self-medicate because you don't understand what's going on in your own brain. You don't understand the voices that you hear, right? So if you're investing in this up front, you're not spending the money in, jail sanctions because the person wasn't compliant 2, 3, 4, 5 times, A theft case, for instance, you can go to jail for up to a year in that. And we're really lucky because in our court, we have judges, and sometimes prosecutors, who understand and want to, work on that treatment aspect, but there's only so much that we can do, There comes a point, where, cost-benefit analysis-wise, you have to fish or cut bait. Either you're going to, impose the jail and be done with it, or you're going to try and try and try again. And it's that trying and trying and trying again, when it's not successful, that costs the money. But if we're able to kind of cut some of those roadblocks down, if we're able to cut some of those barriers down and get direct access to this stuff for these individuals who need it so badly, you know what? Maybe it'll be 3 times instead of 10. And that is a win.
Ms. Castleton, or Jen, what's the X factor? And I don't know if you know what's the X factor in this situation? I think Mr. Sharma referenced it, or I'll be even worse, I'll call you Mr. Sharma. But so what's the X factor in terms of the defendant's desire?
So this is my favorite thing that I've heard all night is the positive ripple effect. That is actually a really compelling concept, I think. And it's, you know, we have, every Monday morning, we have a review calendar. So those are people who have been on probation. And on those review calendars, you have a range of people. You have the people who are vastly out of compliance, who've had a million opportunities. And then you have the people who are kind of, and then you have the people who did what they were supposed to do. And we, as a practice, call those people first. We make it very clear that when there's a courtroom full of people, we say, hey, Your Honor, this person did what they were supposed to do. And some of the times we have, it'll be called a stipulated order of continuance or deferred sentence. And we say, I say this very earnestly, I am very happy to say I'm moving to dismiss this case because he did everything he was supposed to do. That is a moment in those calendars where you have 4 people who are like, hey, I did this. And there's, I think, a sense of accomplishment for them. I think there's a sense of everybody's happy about it. And I think it's exactly true that there's the possibility of a positive ripple effect, is that when you have something like this where it's not easy for anybody to get through any of this stuff. We've talked about the barriers, and one of the things about community court is moving up. So you have swift, certain sanctions when someone isn't compliant, but you're not talking about just throwing away the key. You know, you didn't comply, you're not going to jail for a year. You had a positive UA, you admitted it, you're gonna sit in court all day today. So that you know what's gonna happen if you have it. It happens immediately when you come in, and then we know you're gonna have some setbacks, but you're still gonna be in here with us, and we're gonna be dealing with the fact that we're not throwing everything away because you screwed up once. And then when you have those people that have come back, that have faced some setbacks, but they still have access to the resources that they really need, and you know at the end of the day they actually make it through, that's a big deal. And it's a big deal for the other people who are there to see. You know, it can be done, and I think it's sort of on the mentoring thing too, where having someone, watching someone else, even if it's not their mentor, but watching someone else who has been in court with them on the Thursday mornings and stuff and seeing, hey, wait, that guy, you know, did it and had a couple stumbles. I think that's the real X factor, is turning this whole conversation into ways to help people be successful and address those things that have been just dragging them down. And I think it's great that we can be potentially a resource for that, and hopefully, you know, move this in a positive direction.
And if I could just say real quickly, you know, I think that the really cool thing about this is that it may be the only support that these individuals, or a certain percentage of these individuals, have. You know, not everybody has family. You know, some folks are out there with nobody in the world that they can go to for anything. And to be able to say that we could turn to, you know, a program like this, we have no idea what kind of impact that can have on individuals.
Thank you. And this mentoring thing, can it, Lana, can that serve as a bridge, kind of until we can get people to the professionals?
Absolutely. I mean, I think everybody in here has at some point or another been a mentor to somebody who was in their own family or friends or coworkers who have gone through something. So we're all able to do it. It is a bridge because there isn't enough money, or, you know, there isn't a particular fix that this is going to be end everything, end the addiction, end all of this. But everybody needs to start on a stepping stone, and so many people need encouragement. We all live in hope. We all need to know that somebody cares whether I live or die.
Thank you.
Know, and I matter.
Thank you very much. I want to recognize Representative Michael Pelliciotti. Did I get it right this time? Okay. And any other elected officials that came in? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the question is, hopefully we've kind of created some energy and a vision in you, because your vision right now of what you can do is probably the most important thing in this room. And you were given an interest inventory to fill out. Again, if you're a citizen, you can be involved. If you're a treatment provider, you can be involved. If you're a hospital professional, you can be involved. And for instance, an example, who's going to help us with UAs or those kind of things. But the bottom line is that how do we band together? Again, how do we break those silos and work together to try to cure this issue that we're faced with? And again, we're only one part of the equation. We're going to start small, but think of the vision of how this could lead. Because right now in the courts, the thing we have is we can tell people what to do. It's kind of this or else, right? What about people a network out there that allows people to voluntarily be able to do it before they start having to see us? That's a vision, okay? I'm going to end with a poem that I like. It's I saw some people in my hometown, and I saw some people tearing a building down with a heave and a hoe and a mighty yell. They swung a beam, and the sidewall fell. I asked the foreman, are these people skilled, the type of people you'd want to build? He said, no, indeed, common labor is all I need, for I can tear down in a day or two what it took a builder years to do. As I slowly walked away, I asked myself, what role will I play? Will I be the one that goes around foolishly tearing down? Or will I be the one that builds with care and hope that others will be glad I was there? I want that to apply to you. I want you to feel glad you were here and glad you're in this community and involved in community court. So very much appreciate your presence. Thank you. Be sure to turn in that interest inventory, because there'll be contact from us to get you in to talk about how you can be involved. Thanks.